She needed a husband for Christmas. The billionaire needed a distraction. Secrets Unveil. Day 1. A stranger overheard my crisis and proposed marriage. Day 8. We signed the marriage license. Day 14. I realized I was falling for him. Day 35. He told his family the truth. Day 42. We stood before a judge who would decide our fate. 6 weeks. That's all it took for a fake marriage to become the realest thing in my life. But when a billionaire widower and a desperate baker agree to marry for all the wrong reasons, can love that starts as a lie ever become the truth? The courthouse hearing is tomorrow. And I'm about to find out if love at first transaction is enough to save us both. Welcome to Emotional Voyage. I'm so glad you're here to share this journey with me. If this content resonates with you, please hit the like button and subscribe. Your support helps me create even deeper, more meaningful videos for our community. Let's navigate these emotions together. The lawyer's words hit like a sledgehammer wrapped in legal jargon. Your grandmother has 6 weeks to vacate the property. The developers take possession January 5th. Simone Washington gripped her phone tighter, watching Charleston's afternoon sun paint gold across the bakery display cases she'd spent 3 years perfecting. Sweet traditions wasn't just her business, it was her great-grandmother's recipes, her grandmother's legacy, her mother's retirement plan. And apparently, it was built on land her grandmother had somehow lost in a predatory reverse mortgage Simone had known nothing about. There has to be something. Marriage, her lawyer interrupted. The Homestead Protection Clause activates if she's living with immediate family. Your mother doesn't qualify since she rents in Columbia. But if you were married and living there. He paused. It's a long shot, but it might buy time for appeals. Simone stared at the engagement ring finger that had been bare for 6 years, since Trevor decided a pastry chef with big dreams wasn't enough for a man climbing corporate ladders. 6 weeks until Christmas. 6 weeks to find a husband willing to live in her grandmother's Victorian home in the historic district. 6 weeks to save everything that mattered. Ridiculous, she muttered, ending the call. What's ridiculous? Simone jumped. She'd forgotten about the man in the corner booth, the one who'd been nursing the same coffee for an hour, staring at his laptop like it held answers to questions he hadn't asked yet. He was watching her now with startling blue eyes that seemed too tired for someone who looked barely 40. His wool coat probably cost more than her monthly lease. Everything about him screamed money, from his understated watch to the way he sat, comfortable in his own skin despite the shadows underneath it. Nothing. Sorry, didn't mean to disturb you. Simone grabbed a cleaning cloth, needing to move, to do something other than spiral. You didn't. I've been disturbing myself for the past 2 hours. He closed his laptop with a decisive click. Trying to figure out how to survive my family's Christmas without losing my mind. Something in his voice, dark humor laced with real dread, made Simone look up. He extended his hand across the booth. I'm Julian. Julian Hayes. She knew that name. Everyone in Charleston did. Hayes Properties had restored half the historic district. The family had owned shipping companies since before the Civil War, transformed into commercial real estate empires that now stretched up the entire eastern seaboard. And this was Julian Hayes, the widower. The one the society pages whispered about with that particular mix of pity and fascination reserved for tragic figures with beautiful bank accounts. Simone Washington. I own this place. His handshake was firm, warm. Best pecan tosses I've ever had. I've been here 4 times this week. That's specific praise. My wife used to make them. Something flickered across his face. Not quite pain, but its well-worn echo. Before she died. Yours are better, actually. Don't tell her I said that. The comment should have been morbid. Instead, it felt startlingly honest. Julian gestured to the seat across from him. You look like someone who just got catastrophically bad news. I'm something of an expert in that particular expression. Simone shouldn't sit. She had inventory to check, holiday orders to finalize, a business to run while her world collapsed around her ears. She sat. Hypothetically, she heard herself say. What would you do if you needed to get married in 6 weeks to save your family's home, but you're single and the dating pool in Charleston consists of men who think ambition in a woman means having strong opinions about curtain fabric? Julian's laugh was unexpected, real and a little rusty, like he didn't use it often. Hypothetically, he replied, leaning forward with sudden intensity, I'd wonder if the universe had just handed me the solution to my own impossible problem. What would you do if you had 6 weeks to save everything you loved? Drop your thoughts below. I love reading your perspectives. Julian Hayes had forgotten what it felt like to be genuinely surprised. At 39, after building Hayes Properties into something his great-grandfather would have respected and his father couldn't criticize, after burying a wife at 37 and spending 2 years perfecting the art of existing without actually living, surprise had become a foreign concept. Until a beautiful woman with exhausted brown eyes sat across from him and casually mentioned needing a husband like some people mentioned needing a plumber. I'm listening, he said. Simone laughed, but there wasn't much humor in it. She had the kind of face that probably smiled easily under normal circumstances. Warm brown skin, expressive eyes framed by natural curls pulled into a work-appropriate bun, a mouth built for laughter. Right now, she looked like someone holding together pieces with nothing but willpower and spite. I wasn't serious. I don't even know you. You know I'm Julian Hayes. You know I have money. He said it flatly, the way he'd learned to say it, acknowledging the elephant before it could rampage. You know I'm widowed, which means I'm presumably capable of commitment, at least in theory. And you know I make questionable life choices, because I've eaten my body weight in pecan tosses this week instead of dealing with my problems. That got a real smile. Small, but genuine. Why are you dreading Christmas? She asked. Fair question. Julian considered deflecting. He'd become excellent at deflection. But something about Simone's directness made him want to match it. My father had a stroke last spring. He's recovering, but it scared him. Scared my whole family. Julian traced the edge of his coffee cup. Now they've decided I've grieved long enough. My mother's invited every eligible woman in 3 counties to Christmas dinner. My sisters have made it their personal mission to resurrect my love life. They mean well. But I'm not ready. Maybe I'll never be ready. He met her eyes. And I'm tired of being treated like a project that needs fixing. I want one Christmas where people see me as something other than poor Julian who lost Catherine. Simone nodded slowly, understanding flickering across her features. You need a buffer. Someone to run interference. I need them to believe I'm moving forward. That I'm okay. Julian leaned back. A girlfriend would help. A fiancé would be better. But those require actual emotional availability, which I'm fresh out of. Whereas a wife would make them back off completely. Exactly. He paused, the absurdity of the conversation hitting him fully. I cannot believe I'm actually considering this. Makes 2 of us. Simone pulled out her phone, scrolled, then turned it to show him a photo. A gorgeous Victorian home, painted lady colors immaculate, gingerbread trim perfect. 4 generations of Washington women have lived there. My great-grandmother bought it in 1952 with money she saved working as a seamstress. Do you know what that meant? A black woman buying property in Charleston's historic district in 1952. Julian knew exactly what it meant. He'd studied enough of Charleston's complicated history through his restoration work. My grandmother's living there now. She's 84. Someone convinced her to take a reverse mortgage 5 years ago. Predatory terms, barely legal. I didn't know until this morning. Simone's voice stayed steady, but her hands tightened on her phone. They're evicting her January 5th. The only loophole is an old homestead protection clause. If immediate family lives there, married family, it triggers an automatic appeals process. Buys us time to fight. And your mother? Doesn't qualify. She rents in Columbia. It has to be me, and I have to be married. Simone set her phone down. My lawyer thinks it's a long shot. But it's the only shot we have. Julian's mind was already working through logistics, the way it did with complex property deals. You'd need to actually live there. Developers would challenge anything that looked fraudulent. I know. It would need to look real. Marriage license, cohabitation, the works. I know. And you'd be stuck married to a stranger through the holidays. Possibly longer, depending on the appeals. I'm aware of all of this, Julian. Simone met his gaze squarely. I'm also aware that I'm sitting here talking to a man I met 20 minutes ago about a plan that sounds like a rejected rom-com plot. But I'm out of options and out of time, and you said the universe might have handed you a solution. So either we're both crazy, or we're both desperate enough to consider something completely insane. Julian thought about Christmas dinner. About his mother's pitying looks and his sister's matchmaking schemes. About another year of being frozen in place while everyone else expected him to thaw. About Catherine, who would have called him an idiot for even hesitating. I have conditions, he said. Simone didn't miss a beat. So do I. Then I think we should discuss terms. Properly. Julian pulled out his wallet, left 2 20s on the table for a $7 coffee. Are you free for dinner? I close at 6. 7 o'clock. Peninsula Grill. We'll figure out if we're crazy or desperate. He stood, extending his hand again. Or maybe both. This time when Simone shook his hand, it felt less like a greeting and more like a deal being struck. 7 o'clock, she agreed. But, Julian, if we actually do this, it has to look completely real. No half measures. Can you handle that? Julian thought about the alternative. About endless holidays as the tragic widower. About being stuck while life moved forward without him. Can you? He countered. Her smile was small but fierce. I guess we'll find out. Could you enter a marriage of convenience with a stranger to save what matters most? What would your conditions be? Tell me in the comments. Peninsula Grill's candlelight made everything look softer than it was. Simone had changed from her bakery clothes into a burgundy wrap dress that her mother insisted made her look powerful and approachable, whatever that meant. Sitting across from Julian Hayes in one of Charleston's most exclusive restaurants, she felt neither. She felt like someone playing dress-up in someone else's life. Julian had changed too, though his charcoal suit probably cost more than her monthly revenue. He'd ordered wine without looking at the price, then caught himself. Sorry. Should have asked what you preferred. It's fine. I trust your taste. Simone took a sip. It was excellent, which figured. Though if we're doing this, you should probably know I'm more of a bourbon woman. Noted. Julian pulled out his phone, opened a notes app. Should we make a list? Things we need to know about each other before we accidentally commit fraud. Despite everything, Simone laughed. Is that what we're doing? Committing fraud. Technically, marriage with intent to circumvent legal proceedings could be argued as such. He said it like he was discussing the weather. Though if we're actually married and actually living together, the intent becomes murkier. Intent is hard to prove. You've thought about this. I've spent the last 3 hours thinking about nothing else. Julian set his phone between them. I had my attorney look into the homestead clause. He says if the marriage is legal and the cohabitation is genuine, you've got a solid case for appeal. The reverse mortgage company will fight it, but you'd have time. Simone's chest tightened. You called your attorney? We haven't even agreed to anything. Due diligence. If I'm going to do something reckless, I prefer to understand the risks. His blue eyes were steady. Your turn. What did you do for the last 3 hours? Panicked. Told my best friend Maya I was having dinner with a man and watched her nearly have a heart attack. Didn't mention the potential marriage part because she would have had me committed. Simone traced the rim of her wine glass. Then I looked you up. And you're exactly who you said you were. Hayes Properties restored the waterfront market, the Battery Street buildings, half of King Street's commercial district. Your family's been in Charleston since 1843. You went to Davidson, came back to run the business at 25 when your father had his first health scare. She paused. Your wife Catherine was a pediatric surgeon. You were married 8 years. The obituary said she died from an aneurysm. I'm sorry. Something flickered across Julian's face, not quite pain, but recognition of it. She collapsed during morning rounds. Gone before the ambulance arrived. He said it quietly, factually. Nothing anyone could have done. That's what they kept telling me. Like randomness was supposed to be comforting. Is it? No. But it's true. Julian picked up his wine, set it down without drinking. She was brilliant. Funny. She'd have liked you, I think. She had a thing for people who built things with their hands. Simone thought about her bakery, about kneading dough at 4 in the morning, about the particular alchemy of flour and butter and heat. I looked at your restoration projects. You build things too. I restore what's already there. You create something new every day. Julian leaned forward slightly. Tell me about your family. The real version, not the property records. So Simone told him. About her great-grandmother Iris who'd sewn clothes for white families and saved every penny in a tobacco tin. About her grandmother Dorothy who'd turned that Victorian into a home that hosted every family gathering, every celebration, every crisis. About her mother who'd moved to Columbia for a teaching job but called every single day to check on Mama Dorothy. And you? Julian asked. Why bakery? Why Charleston? My great-grandmother's recipes. My grandmother taught me to bake when I was 7, said every woman should know how to make something that brings people joy. Simone smiled at the memory. I worked in kitchens in Atlanta for years. Fine dining, the whole prestige thing. But it felt empty. So I came home, opened Sweet Traditions, and started making the desserts that actually meant something. Pecan tosses. Among other things. She studied him. You really have been there 4 times this week. 5, actually. I came back after you closed last night. Julian had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. I sat in my car and stared at the building like a creep. Why? Because it reminded me that things can still taste like something. The last 2 years, everything's been muted. Then I bit into something your great-grandmother invented in 1950 whatever, and I could actually taste it. He met her eyes. That probably sounds insane. No, Simone said softly. It sounds like grief. And like maybe you're ready to stop being numb. The waiter arrived with appetizers neither of them had noticed ordering. They ate in comfortable silence for a moment. My conditions, Julian finally said. We should discuss them. Okay. I need this to look real enough that my family stops treating me like broken china. That means public appearances, family events, the whole performance. He paused. But privately, I need boundaries. Separate bedrooms. No expectations beyond the practical. And when this is over, when your house is safe, we end it quietly. Mutual divorce, no drama. Reasonable. Simone pulled out her own phone. My conditions, you live in my grandmother's house, actually live there. Not just male duty. I need this ironclad. We attend her church on Sundays, have Sunday dinner with her and my mother. You learn about my family, remember their stories. If we're selling this, you have to actually care. I can do that. And when it's over, you help me find a real attorney. One who can nail the bastards who targeted my grandmother. Her voice hardened. I want them buried in litigation. Julian's smile was sharp. I have an entire legal team that would love nothing more. Consider it done. They looked at each other across the candlelight, 2 desperate people crafting something impossible. 6 weeks until Christmas, Simone said. We'd need to get married fast. This week, maybe. Make it look like we've been secretly dating. My family will lose their minds. So will mine. Julian raised his wine glass. To absolutely terrible decisions? Simone touched her glass to his, the crystal singing softly. To saving what matters, she corrected. And just like that, she was engaged to a stranger. What's more important in a marriage, real love or real commitment to the same goal? Drop your answer below. The Charleston County Courthouse smelled like old paper and broken promises. Simone signed her name on the marriage license 3 days after dinner at Peninsula Grill, her hand steadier than she'd expected. Julian's signature appeared beside hers in confident strokes, the handwriting of a man who signed contracts daily without flinching. That's it, she murmured. The clerk, a woman in her 60s with reading glasses on a beaded chain, smiled warmly. That's it. You've got 60 days to have the ceremony and file. Congratulations. They walked out into November sunshine that felt too bright for what they'd just done. We need a story, Julian said, unlocking his car, a Range Rover that was clean but not showy, practical wealth. People will ask how we met. When we knew. The bakery. 4 weeks ago. Simone slid into leather seats that probably cost more than her oven. You came in for coffee, kept coming back. We talked. It happened fast. Too fast. My family will be suspicious. Then we tell them the truth, part of it. She turned to face him. Your wife died. You've been grieving. Then you walked into my bakery and something shifted. You felt something again. We both knew it was crazy, but after losing Catherine, you learned life's too short to waste time questioning the good things when they show up. Julian's hands tightened on the steering wheel. You're good at this. I've watched enough romantic movies with my mother to know the script. Simone's phone buzzed. Her grandmother. She'd been calling all morning. I need to tell my family. Today. Mine too. He didn't sound thrilled about it. Want to rip the bandage off together? Sunday dinner. You mean meet each other's families 4 days after getting a marriage license? We're getting married in 2 weeks. Nothing about this is conventional. Julian finally looked at her, and something in his expression had softened. Besides, I promised to actually care, remember? Might as well start now. They went to Mama Dorothy's house first. The Victorian looked even more beautiful up close, a painted lady in seafoam green and cream, with purple accents that shouldn't have worked but absolutely did. The porch wrapped around 2 sides, dotted with ferns hanging in the November air. Julian stopped walking halfway up the path. This is incredible, he breathed, his professional eye clearly cataloging details. The gingerbread trim is original. And these brackets, I've only seen this style in 3 other homes in Charleston. The restoration work is flawless. My grandmother's been maintaining it for 40 years. She wouldn't let it fall apart. Simone grabbed his hand without thinking, then realized what she'd done. His fingers were warm, steady. Sorry. Should have asked. It's fine. Julian didn't let go. We should probably get used to it. The front door flew open before they reached it. Mama Dorothy stood there in a purple dress and her Sunday pearls even though it was Thursday, 84 years old and sharp as cut glass. Her eyes went straight to their joined hands, then to Julian's face, then to Simone's with an expression that said we will be talking about this. Mama Dorothy, this is Julian Hayes. Julian, my grandmother. Mrs. Washington. Julian extended his free hand, his voice respectful. It's an honor to meet you, Hayes. Dorothy shook his hand but didn't smile. The property people. I know your buildings. Yes, ma'am. You married. Simone felt Julian tense slightly. I was. My wife passed 2 years ago. Something shifted in Dorothy's expression, not sympathy exactly, but recognition. I lost my Raymond 15 years back. Heart attack in his garden, surrounded by his tomatoes. He'd have wanted it that way. Catherine died at the hospital, Julian said quietly. She'd have hated that. She always said hospitals were for healing, not He stopped. Collected himself. I'm sorry. You don't need to hear about that. Baby, grief don't have a timer. You talk about her all you need. Dorothy finally stepped aside. Your mama's in the kitchen, Simone. And she's gonna have opinions about this. Fair warning. Simone's mother, Patricia, took one look at them and set down her sweet tea with a thunk. Simone Marie Washington. Why is Julian Hayes holding your hand in your grandmother's foyer? Because I asked him to marry me, Simone said, then watched her mother's face go through 5 emotions at once. Well, technically we asked each other. Mama, I know this sounds crazy. Crazy? Baby, I don't even know where to start. Patricia looked at Julian, then at Simone, then at the ceiling like it might offer answers. You've been single for 6 years. You haven't mentioned dating anyone. And now suddenly you're marrying. No offense, Mr. Hayes, a man none of us have met. Actually, I need to marry him to save this house. The silence was deafening. Simone explained it all, the reverse mortgage, the homestead clause, the eviction date. Dorothy sank into her chair, suddenly looking every one of her 84 years. Patricia's hand went to her mother's shoulder. Why didn't you tell me? Patricia's voice cracked. Mama, why didn't you say something? Didn't want to burden you girls. Thought I could handle it. Dorothy's eyes were wet. I'm so ashamed. Julian, who'd been quiet, spoke up. Mrs. Washington, the people who did this are professionals at targeting elderly homeowners. This wasn't your fault. His voice carried the weight of absolute certainty. And I promise you, we're going to make this right. Dorothy looked at him for a long moment. You love my granddaughter? Simone held her breath. I'm learning to, Julian said. It wasn't a lie, not exactly. She walked into my life when I'd forgotten what hope felt like. I know this is fast. I know you have no reason to trust me. But I give you my word. I will protect her, and I will protect this house. Patricia studied them both with a mother's laser focus. How long have you actually known each other? 4 weeks, Simone admitted. And you're sure about this? Simone looked at Julian, this stranger who'd somehow become her co-conspirator, her almost husband, her impossible solution. I'm sure. Then I guess, Patricia said slowly, we have a wedding to plan. Have you ever had to make a life-changing decision on pure instinct? How did it turn out? Share your story below. The Hayes family estate made Mama Dorothy's Victorian look like a dollhouse. Simone stood in the circular driveway, staring at what could only be called a mansion. White columns, expansive wings, the kind of southern elegance that came with generational wealth and careful preservation. Through the tall windows, she could see chandeliers glittering, people moving. You grew up here? She asked. Julian looked uncomfortable. Unfortunately. Ready to meet the firing squad. Your family can't be that bad. They're not bad. They're just. He searched for words. A lot. And they're going to have questions we didn't rehearse answers for. He was right. Julian's mother, Ellen Hayes, opened the door herself, a woman in her late 60s with perfectly styled silver hair and the kind of posture that came from decades of junior league meetings. Her eyes widened when she saw Simone, then went to their joined hands, then to her son's face. Julian, you said you were bringing a guest. You didn't mention. She stopped herself, rearranged her expression into polite warmth. I'm sorry, how rude of me. I'm Ellen Hayes. Simone Washington, Mrs. Hayes. Thank you for having me. Washington. Ellen's mind was clearly working. Not the Washington Bakery on King Street. That's mine, yes ma'am. I've had your lemon bars. They're extraordinary. Ellen stepped aside, letting them in. Though I have to say, Julian, when you called to say you were bringing someone important, I didn't expect. Well, come in, come in. Your father's in the library with your sisters. The library was less a room and more a cathedral to wealth. Floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, leather furniture, a fireplace big enough to stand in. Julian's father, Robert Hayes, sat in a wingback chair with a cane beside him, looking thinner than Simone expected but alert. Two women who had to be Julian's sisters stopped mid-conversation. "Everyone," Julian said, his hand tightening almost imperceptibly on Simone's. "This is Simone Washington, my fiancée." The room went silent. Then erupted. "You're what?" The younger sister, mid-30s, dark hair, Julian's same eyes, stood up so fast she nearly knocked over her wine. "Jules, what are you talking about?" "Caroline, let him speak." The older sister, early 40s with lighter hair pulled back in a sleek bun, looked between them with sharp intelligence. "I'm Rebecca. The loud one is Caroline. And you've clearly been keeping secrets, little brother." Robert Hayes just watched, saying nothing. "We met a month ago at Simone's bakery," Julian said, his voice steady. "I kept going back. We started talking. Then we couldn't stop talking." He looked at Simone, and something in his expression made her chest tighten. It looked almost real. "I wasn't looking for this. After Catherine, I thought I was done. But Simone made me remember what it felt like to want something again." "A month," Ellen repeated faintly. "You've known her a month." "I knew I'd marry Catherine after 3 weeks," Robert finally spoke, his voice gravelly from the stroke but firm. "Sometimes you just know." "Daddy, that was different," Caroline started. "Was it?" "Because I seem to recall your mother's parents saying the exact same thing." Robert gestured to the seat beside him. "Come here, young lady. Let me look at you." Simone crossed to him, aware of every eye tracking her movement. Robert Hayes studied her with the kind of assessment that probably made business rivals sweat. "You're the one who bought the old Morrison building and turned it into a bakery." "Yes, sir. 3 years ago. Smart move. That location was undervalued." He leaned forward slightly. "And you're making it work in a competitive market. That takes more than good recipes. Takes business sense. My great-grandmother always said if you're going to do something, do it right or don't do it at all." Something like approval flickered in Robert's eyes. "Sounds like a wise woman. What does your family think about this sudden engagement?" "They think we're moving too fast," Simone said honestly. "My mother's convinced Julian's going to break my heart. My grandmother asked him if he loved me." "And what did he say?" Ellen asked quietly. Julian answered before Simone could. "I said I'm learning to. Because that's the truth." He moved to stand beside Simone, his hand finding her shoulder in a gesture that felt protective. "I know this looks sudden. I know you're worried. But I'm not asking for permission. I'm 39 years old. I'm asking for your support." "When's the wedding?" Rebecca asked, still watching them with that sharp gaze. 2 weeks. Small ceremony, immediate family only. At Simone's grandmother's house. 2 weeks. Caroline looked like she might faint. "Jules, that's insane." "It's what we want." Julian's voice had gone firm, the tone of someone used to making decisions and standing by them. "Catherine and I had a big wedding. 300 people, 6 months of planning. It was beautiful, and it was right for us then. This is different. This is ours." The invocation of Catherine's name shifted something in the room. Ellen's expression softened. Caroline looked away, blinking. "I want to know her," Robert said suddenly. "Simone, can you have dinner here? Tomorrow night. Just you, me, Ellen, and Julian. I want to hear your story properly." It wasn't a request. "I'd like that," Simone said. They stayed another hour, navigating questions and skeptical looks and Caroline's borderline interrogation about everything from Simone's favorite books to her 5-year business plan. Rebecca stayed quieter, but Simone felt her watching, analyzing. In the car afterward, Julian exhaled slowly. "That was brutal," he said. "Your sister Rebecca doesn't believe us." "No. She's too smart for her own good." He glanced over. "You were amazing, though. The way you handled my father, He respects people who don't try to impress him. I wasn't trying to impress him. I was just being myself. I know. That's what made it work. Julian was quiet for a moment. Tomorrow night's dinner is going to be worse. Fair warning. Why? Because my father's going to ask you about your intentions. About what happens after. Julian's jaw tightened. He's going to want to know if this is real. Simone looked at her engagement ring, a simple platinum band with a single diamond that Julian had presented 2 days ago with the awkward disclaimer that they could exchange it for something she actually liked. She hadn't wanted to exchange it. Then we tell him what we've been telling everyone, she said softly. That sometimes the best things happen when you stop planning and start trusting. Julian pulled into Sweet Tradition's parking lot, put the car in park but didn't turn it off. Simone. Yeah. Thank you. For not making me do this alone. She looked at him, really looked at him, and saw the exhaustion underneath the performance, the grief he was trying so hard to transform into something his family could accept. We're in this together now, she said. That was the deal, remember? His smile was small but genuine. How could I forget? When you're pretending for others, how do you know when it starts becoming real? Tell me what you think. Moving into Mama Dorothy's Victorian should have felt temporary. Instead, watching Julian carry boxes up the curved staircase, his sleeves rolled up, hair slightly disheveled, felt dangerously domestic. Guest room's the third door on the left, Simone called up, then caught her grandmother's knowing look. What? Nothing, baby. Just thinking that man fills out those jeans real nice for someone with all that money. Mama Dorothy. Her grandmother's laugh was wicked. I'm 84, not dead. And you could do worse than a handsome man who shows up with his own tools to fix my porch railing without being asked. Simone had noticed that too. Julian had arrived that morning, taken one look at the loose railing, and returned 20 minutes later with a toolbox from his car. He'd spent an hour making repairs while chatting with Mama Dorothy about the house's original construction. He was trying. Actually trying. That night, after Dorothy had gone to bed, Simone found Julian in the kitchen studying a photo wall she'd forgotten was there. 4 generations of Washington women in a visual timeline. Weddings, christenings, Sunday dinners, ordinary moments made sacred by love. This is your great-grandmother? He pointed to a black and white photo from the 50s, a woman in her Sunday best standing proudly in front of the Victorian's porch. Iris Washington. The day she got the deed. She's standing exactly how you stand when you're proud of something. Same shoulders. Julian tilted his head. And this one. My parents' wedding. 1989. Her father in his Air Force dress uniform, her mother radiant in lace. He died when I was 12. Heart condition nobody knew about. I'm sorry. It's been a long time. Simone moved beside him, close enough to feel his warmth. Mama never remarried. Said lightning doesn't strike twice, and she'd rather have the memory of something real than the disappointment of something less. Julian was quiet for a long moment. Do you believe that? That you only get one? I don't know. Do you? I used to. His voice went soft. Catherine was it for me. We met in college, got married at 25, built a whole life. When she died, I thought that was the end of my story. Just existing until I wasn't anymore. Simone's chest ached. What changed? Honestly, you. He turned to face her fully. Not in some romantic revelation way. More like, you reminded me that life keeps insisting on happening whether you're ready or not. Your great-grandmother buying this house. You building your bakery. My family refusing to let me disappear into grief. It's all just life, stubbornly continuing. That's very poetic for someone who spent the afternoon caulking windows. His laugh surprised them both. I contain multitudes. The moment stretched between them, comfortable in a way that should have been impossible for 2 people who'd known each other less than 6 weeks. Julian. Simone heard herself say. This thing we're doing, the separate bedrooms, the boundaries, that's still what you want, right? Something flickered in his blue eyes. Why do you ask? Because when you were with your family, when you touched my shoulder and said you were learning to love me. She stopped, choosing words carefully. It didn't feel like acting. No, he admitted quietly. It didn't. The air between them shifted. We should probably talk about that, Simone said. Probably. But Julian didn't move away. My therapist. Yes, I have a therapist. Catherine insisted everyone should. She told me that grief doesn't mean you stop feeling things. It just means the feelings get complicated. And what are you feeling right now? He studied her face like he was trying to memorize it. Terrified. Guilty. Like I'm betraying Catherine by noticing that you have the most expressive eyes I've ever seen. Like I'm using you even though you're using me just as much. Like maybe this fake marriage is the most honest thing I've done in 2 years. Simone's breath caught. Julian. And attracted, he continued, his voice dropping. Really attracted, which makes everything messier because that wasn't part of the deal. She should step back. Create distance. Remind him of their agreement. Instead, she said, what if we adjusted the deal? How? I don't know yet. But maybe. Simone reached up, her fingers barely brushing his jaw. Maybe we stop trying to predict what this is and just let it be what it becomes. Julian's hand came up to cover hers, his thumb stroking across her knuckles. That's a dangerous proposition. More dangerous than marrying a stranger? Yes. Because I could fall for you. Probably already am. A little. His honesty was brutal and beautiful. And in 4 weeks, maybe 8 if the appeals drag, this ends. We agreed. Clean break, no complications. Then we don't fall, Simone said, even as her heart called her a liar. We just allow for the possibility of honest affection between 2 people in an unusual situation. Honest affection. Julian's smile was crooked. Is that what we're calling this? Do you have a better term? Instead of answering, he leaned down slowly, giving her time to pull away, to reinforce boundaries, to be sensible. Simone wasn't feeling sensible. Their kiss was soft, tentative, nothing like the passionate clinches in her mother's romance novels. It was a question and an answer, a risk and a reassurance. It tasted like possibility and fear in equal measure. When they pulled apart, Julian rested his forehead against hers. We're going to mess this up, he whispered. Probably. Simone's hands had somehow found their way to his chest, feeling his heartbeat under expensive cotton. But maybe that's okay. Maybe messy is more honest than perfect. Your family's going to have opinions. So is yours. The lawyers will say we're complicating the case. When has that ever stopped anyone from being human? Simone stepped back, just enough to think clearly. New rule, we're honest. About what we're feeling, about what we want. No pretending with each other, only with everyone else. And if one of us wants to stop, then we stop. No guilt, no pressure. She held out her hand. Deal. Julian looked at her outstretched hand for a long moment, then ignored it completely and kissed her again. Deeper this time, his hands framing her face like she was something precious. When they finally came up for air, his smile was the most genuine she'd seen. Deal, he said. Upstairs, a floorboard creaked. They jumped apart like teenagers caught by parents. She's awake, Simone hissed. She definitely heard that. Oh God, she's going to tell my mother. Julian was already laughing, quiet and helpless. Your face right now. This isn't funny. It absolutely is. He grabbed her hand, pulling her toward the stairs. Come on. Let's go face the music together. And somehow, with his hand warm around hers and laughter bubbling up despite the complications, Simone thought maybe they'd be okay. Even if okay looked nothing like the plan. Have you ever started something fake that became real? When did you know it had shifted? Drop your stories below. The wedding was supposed to be simple. Simone should have known better than to give her mother and Julian's sisters a 2-week timeline and expect simple. Absolutely not. Caroline held up a dress that looked like it had murdered a flock of doves. You're marrying into the Hayes family. You need something with presence. I need something I can actually move in, Simone countered, eyeing the monstrosity. And that I can afford. Julian's paying. No, he's not. Simone's voice went firm. We agreed. I pay for my dress, he handles the venue logistics. This may be unconventional, but I'm not a charity case. Rebecca, who'd been silent in the corner of the bridal boutique, finally spoke. Caroline, put down the meringue. Simone, try the one on the end. Simple silk, clean lines. It's you. The dress was perfect, ivory silk that skimmed her curves without clinging, a subtle train, delicate beading at the shoulders. When Simone stepped out of the dressing room, even Caroline went quiet. Oh, her mother breathed. Baby, you look just like your grandmother did in her wedding photo. Patricia's eyes were wet, which made Simone's eyes sting in response. It's too much, Simone said, checking the price tag. Her stomach dropped. Way too much. It's on me. Rebecca stood, pulling out a black card. Wedding gift. And before you argue, I own 3 hotels and a commercial property firm. I can afford it. Rebecca, I can't. You can, and you will. Because my brother looks at you the way he hasn't looked at anything in 2 years, and I don't care if this wedding is happening fast or slow or upside down. Rebecca's voice softened. You're making him remember how to be alive. That's worth every penny. Simone met Rebecca's eyes in the mirror and saw something unexpected, genuine affection, and underneath it, a question. Are you going to hurt him? I won't break his heart, Simone said quietly, answering what wasn't asked. That's not what this is. Then what is it? Good question. What was it when you married someone to save your family's home but kissed him in your grandmother's kitchen like you meant it? When separate bedrooms became talking until 2 a.m. through cracked doors? When a business arrangement started feeling like the early stages of something terrifyingly real? Honest, Simone finally said. Whatever else it is, it's honest. Rebecca studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Good enough. The cracks started showing 3 days before the wedding. Julian came home, and when had she started thinking of it as home for both of them? With tension written across his shoulders. He kissed Simone's cheek absently, a gesture that had become habit, then disappeared into his temporary office without a word. She found him an hour later, staring at his laptop with an expression that made her chest tighten. What happened? The reverse mortgage company is fighting back. They're arguing the marriage is fraudulent, a scheme to circumvent legal debt collection. Julian's voice was tight. They've requested a hearing. If the judge agrees to investigate before the eviction date, we lose the house anyway. Simone sank into the chair across from him. Can they prove it's fraudulent? Not easily. We're legally married as of yesterday. The courthouse ceremony had been quick, efficient, witnessed by their lawyers. The real wedding was for family. And we're living together. But they're going to dig. Look for evidence we barely knew each other, that this was transactional. Which it was. Initially. Julian closed his laptop. But Simone, if they subpoena our phones, our emails, our bank records, they'll see the timeline. First contact to marriage license in 4 days. They'll argue no reasonable person falls in love that fast. People do it all the time. Not people with 100-year-old property and a predatory mortgage at stake. He rubbed his face, exhausted. My attorney says we need to be prepared for intimate questions. How we met, when we first kissed, details that prove emotional connection, not financial arrangement. Simone's stomach churned. So we tell them the truth. Part of it. We met, we connected, things moved fast because you'd lost Catherine and I reminded you that life still had good things. We fell for each other quickly because sometimes that's how it happens. And the house? Your grandmother's eviction notice? The convenient timing was a factor we can't deny. But Julian, she leaned forward, needing him to hear this. We didn't fall in love to save a house. We agreed to marry to save it. The feelings came after. That's not fraud. That's just life being messy and human. You think a judge will buy that? I think we make them buy it. Because it's true. Simone reached across the desk, taking his hand. Isn't it true? Julian's fingers tightened around hers. You're asking if I have real feelings for you. I'm asking if we're still pretending. The silence stretched between them, heavy with implications. I stopped pretending somewhere between fixing your grandmother's porch railing and learning that you hum when you bake, Julian said quietly. Probably the moment you looked at my father like he was just a man instead of a Hayes, and he actually smiled. Maybe before that, when you told me grief doesn't have a timer. Simone's throat went tight. Julian. But here's the thing that keeps me up at night. His voice dropped. What if you're only feeling this because of the situation? The forced proximity, the shared goal, the pressure? What if when this is over and the house is saved, you wake up and realize you married a man you barely know? What if you realize the same thing? I won't. How can you be sure? Julian stood, moved around the desk until he was kneeling in front of her chair, this billionaire in his expensive suit, looking up at her like she held answers he desperately needed. Because Catherine taught me what real feels like. And this, feels real. His hands framed her face. I'm not confusing you with her. I'm not trying to replace what I lost. You're entirely your own person, and I'm falling for that person in ways that terrify me because I wasn't supposed to get this twice. Simone kissed him, tasting salt and fear and hope. Then we fight, she whispered against his mouth. We go to that hearing, we tell them the truth, that yes, we married quickly for practical reasons, but we're staying married because somewhere in the middle of solving our problems, we found each other. And if they don't believe us, then we make them believe. She pulled back, meeting his eyes. But Julian, I need to know, are you ready for that? For people to scrutinize this, us? For your family to know the whole story? His jaw tightened. My family can handle the truth. Can they? Because right now they think their grieving son found unexpected love. If they find out we started as a business arrangement, they'll understand I was trying to survive, Julian cut in. And they'll see that somewhere in that survival, I found a reason to actually live again. Simone wanted to believe him. Wanted to believe this fragile thing between them could withstand legal scrutiny and family judgment and the harsh light of truth. But 3 days before their wedding, with lawyers circling and questions mounting, she couldn't shake the feeling that something perfect was about to crack wide open. We should tell them, she said. Your family, my family. Before the hearing. Before someone else controls the narrative. Julian stood, pulling her up with him. You're sure? No. But I'm sure I don't want to lie to the people we love. Simone pressed her hand to his chest, feeling his heartbeat. We started this with deception. Maybe it's time we tried complete honesty. At our wedding reception? At Sunday dinner? Tomorrow? Both families, together. She smiled despite the fear. Go big or go home, right? Julian kissed her forehead, soft and lingering. You're either the bravest person I know or the most reckless. Can't I be both? His laugh was quiet, resigned. Yeah, you really can. Would you risk everything by telling the truth, or protect what you've built with careful silence? What would you do? Sunday dinner was supposed to be a celebration. Instead, Simone stood in Mama Dorothy's dining room, watching two families who'd barely met each other settle around a table loaded with her grandmother's best china, and felt like she was about to detonate a bomb. Julian's hand found hers under the table, warm, steady, terrified. You don't have to do this, he whispered. Yes, I do. Patricia was laughing at something Robert Hayes said, both fathers bonding over military service stories. Ellen and Mama Dorothy were comparing recipes. Caroline was showing Simone's cousin Maya photos of the wedding flowers. Rebecca sat quietly, watching everything with those two smart eyes. Normal. Happy. Built on a foundation Simone was about to crack wide open. She stood, her chair scraping against hardwood. Conversations died. I need to tell you all something, Simone began, her voice shakier than she wanted. About how Julian and I really met. About why we're really getting married. Julian stood beside her, his jaw tight but his shoulders back. Facing it together. Baby, what are you talking about? Patricia's smile faltered. Simone looked at her grandmother, 84 years old, watching her legacy home slip away through no fault of her own. Then at Julian's father, recovering from a stroke that had scared his whole family into hypervigilance. People who'd been hurt enough. The reverse mortgage company is fighting the homestead protection. They're claiming our marriage is fraudulent. She forced herself to continue. And technically, they're not completely wrong. The room went deadly silent. Simone, Mama Dorothy started. Let me finish. Please. Simone's hands were shaking. I met Julian 5 weeks ago. Not months ago like we implied. 5 weeks. I was on the phone with my lawyer, panicking about the eviction, and Julian overheard. He had his own reasons for needing what I needed. Ellen's face had gone pale. What exactly did you need? Julian took over, his voice steady. My family was planning an intervention disguised as Christmas. Matchmaking, concerned conversations, treating me like I was broken. He looked at his mother. You meant well. Everyone did. But I couldn't breathe under all that care. I needed space to grieve on my own timeline, not everyone else's. So you married a stranger? Caroline's voice rose. Jules, that's insane. I married someone who needed help as much as I did, Julian corrected. Simone needed a husband to trigger the homestead clause. I needed my family to believe I was moving forward. It was supposed to be temporary, practical, a solution that helped us both. Rebecca leaned back, her expression unreadable. Was supposed to be. We didn't plan on actually falling for each other, Simone said quietly. That part wasn't fake. The timeline was compressed, the catalyst was unconventional, but what happened after? She looked at Julian. That's real. All of it. How real can it be? Patricia stood, her voice shaking. You lied to us. Stood in this house and let us believe. She pressed her hand to her chest. Baby, do you even know this man? I know he spent 3 hours fixing Mama Dorothy's porch railing without being asked. I know he researches predatory lending laws at midnight because he's furious about what happened to our family. I know he still talks to his late wife sometimes, and he feels guilty about moving forward, and he takes his coffee black but wishes he liked it sweet. Julian's hand tightened on hers. I know Simone hums when she's baking her great-grandmother's recipes. I know she calls her mother every morning at 6:30. I know she's terrified of losing this house because it's not about property. It's about preserving the legacy of a black woman who bought her own piece of Charleston in 1952 when that was nearly impossible. Pretty words, Robert said, his voice gravelly and hard. But son, you built Hayes Properties on integrity. And this is me surviving, Julian cut in, and Simone heard steel in his voice she'd never heard before. You had a stroke, Dad. You almost died. And instead of letting me process that fear, everyone decided I needed to process Catherine instead. To move on. To be fixed. His voice cracked. I wasn't broken. I was grieving. There's a difference. Ellen made a small sound, her hand going to her mouth. I met Simone and saw someone fighting for something bigger than herself. Someone who understood that sometimes you do what you have to do, even if it's not conventional. Julian looked around the table. Yes, we got married quickly. Yes, there were practical reasons. But we were honest with each other from the beginning. More honest than I've been with anyone since Catherine died. Including us, Rebecca said softly. It wasn't an accusation. Just a fact. Including you. And I'm sorry for that. Julian's voice gentled. But I'm not sorry for marrying her. Mama Dorothy, who'd been silent through everything, finally spoke. When were you planning to tell us? Before or after the wedding? Before, Simone said. Tomorrow was supposed to be a celebration, but it felt wrong to let you celebrate something based on a lie. Even a partial one. The hearing's in 4 days, Julian added. The judge is going to ask intimate questions about our relationship timeline. Our families were going to find out anyway. We wanted you to hear it from us first. Patricia sat down heavily. I don't even know what to say to you right now. Say you understand why we did it, Simone pleaded. Say you know we wouldn't have gone this far if we didn't believe. Believe what? That a fake marriage turned real in 5 weeks. Patricia's laugh was bitter. Simone, you're smarter than this. Am I? Because from where I'm sitting, I met a man who sees me, actually sees me, not just as a baker or a granddaughter or someone's potential wife, but as a whole person. Simone's voice strengthened. And yeah, maybe it started as a transaction. But it became a partnership. Then a friendship. And now we're in love, Julian finished. I know how that sounds given the timeline. But it's true. Ellen stood abruptly, her chair scraping back. She looked at Julian for a long moment, her eyes wet, then walked out of the room. Robert followed without a word. Caroline stared at them both. You've ruined everything. Her voice was barely a whisper. We were so happy you were healing, Jules. So grateful you'd found someone. And it was all just. It wasn't all anything, Julian said desperately. Caroline, please. But she was already leaving, Maya trailing behind her with an apologetic glance at Simone. Only Rebecca remained at the table with Simone, Julian, Patricia, and Mama Dorothy. Well, Rebecca said into the silence. That went about as badly as possible. Patricia turned to her mother. Mama, did you know about this? Not until just now. Dorothy's hands were folded on the table, her face unreadable. But I suspected something wasn't quite right. Nobody falls that hard that fast unless they're running from something or towards something desperate. We were both, Simone admitted. And I'm sorry we lied. But I'm not sorry I asked him to help save this house. And I'm not sorry I fell in love with him while we were trying. Love, Patricia repeated. You really believe that's what this is? Julian answered before Simone could. Mrs. Washington, I buried my wife 2 years ago. I know what love feels like. The real kind, the kind that builds over years. This isn't that. Not yet. He paused. But it's the beginning of it. And I think if you give us a chance, if you let us prove this is more than just a legal strategy, you'll see it too. Mama Dorothy stood slowly, her chair creaking. Everyone watched as she moved around the table to where Simone and Julian stood. You understand, she said quietly, that if this falls apart, my grandbaby's the one who gets hurt? Yes, ma'am. And you understand that I'm trusting you with more than just property protection? I'm trusting you with the best thing my family ever made. Julian's voice was rough. I understand. Dorothy studied him for a long moment, then did something unexpected. She took his face in her weathered hands. Then you better fight like hell to make this real, son. Because that girl loves with her whole heart, and if you break it, there won't be enough money in Charleston to save you from me. Despite everything, Julian smiled. Yes, ma'am. She patted his cheek, then turned to Simone. And you better make sure you're doing this for the right reasons. Not just for this house. I am, Mama Dorothy. I promise. Then I guess we've got a wedding to finish planning. Dorothy looked at Patricia. You coming, or you gonna sit there being mad all night? Patricia closed her eyes, took a long breath, then stood. She looked at Simone with an expression that was equal parts hurt and love. We're talking about this. Properly. Tomorrow. Okay, Mama. And you? Patricia pointed at Julian. You hurt my daughter, and Mama Dorothy won't get the chance to come after you. Understand. Perfectly. The mothers left together, their quiet conversation fading into the kitchen. Rebecca stood last, gathering her purse. She stopped beside Julian, her hand on his shoulder. For what it's worth, she said quietly, I believe you. Both of you. She glanced at Simone. But you've got 3 days to convince a judge. And family's easy compared to the legal system. When everyone had gone, Simone and Julian stood in the empty dining room, surrounded by half-eaten food and the wreckage of confession. That was horrible, Simone whispered. Julian pulled her close, his face buried in her hair. Yeah. Do you think they'll forgive us? Eventually. Maybe. He pulled back to look at her. Do you regret telling them? Simone thought about lies and truth, about foundations built on sand versus stone. No, she said. I regret that we hurt them. But not that we told the truth. Even if it costs us everything. She kissed him, soft, certain, real. We already decided what matters most, she said. Now we just have to prove it. Has telling the truth ever cost you something important? Was it worth it in the end? Share your experience below. The hearing was scheduled for 9 a.m. At 3:30 in the morning, Simone found Julian in the kitchen, staring at a cup of coffee he hadn't touched. He'd been in his office until midnight, reviewing depositions with his attorney. She'd heard him pacing in his room after that. Couldn't sleep either, she asked. He looked up, and the exhaustion in his eyes made her chest ache. They're going to ask when we first had sex. Simone froze halfway to the coffee pot. What? The opposing counsel. My attorney warned me. They're going to argue that a marriage without physical intimacy proves it's a sham. Julian's laugh was hollow, which is ironic, considering plenty of real marriages exist without it. But apparently the legal system has opinions about what makes a union legitimate. They'd kissed, held hands, slept in separate rooms with doors that stayed cracked open so they could talk in the dark. But they hadn't. We could lie, Simone said quietly. Perjury's a crime. So is what they did to my grandmother, but they're not the ones on trial here. She sat across from him, anger building. This is invasive. Our intimate life is nobody's business. Except it is. Because we made it their business when we got married to stop an eviction. Julian finally met her eyes. Simone, if we lose tomorrow, if the judge agrees this is fraudulent, your grandmother gets evicted in 2 days. Day after our wedding. And I get investigated for conspiracy to commit fraud. They can't prove. They have our bank records. The timeline. Text messages from the first week that are very clearly 2 people negotiating a business arrangement. He pulled out his phone, scrolled, read aloud. Separate bedrooms, no expectations beyond the practical. That's from you. Day 3. Want to guess how that plays in court? Simone's stomach dropped. We can explain the context. Can we? Because the context is that we're 2 people who made a calculated decision to solve our respective problems through legal marriage. The feelings came after. Julian set his phone down. And how do we prove feelings, Simone? How do we convince a judge that somewhere between fixing porch railings and learning each other's coffee preferences, this became real? We tell them the truth. That yes, we started as strangers with a plan, but what? We fell in love in 5 weeks? Nobody believes that. You said you believed it. Simone's voice cracked. Last night, at dinner, you said. I know what I said. Julian stood abruptly, pacing. And I meant it. but meaning it doesn't make it sound less insane in a courtroom. We have no long-term history, no photos together before November, no witnesses to a developing relationship because there was no developing relationship. There was a transaction that evolved. So what are you saying? That we should give up? I'm saying maybe we should be realistic about our chances. He turned to face her. My attorney thinks we have a 30% shot at best. The reverse mortgage company has a team of lawyers whose entire job is dismantling cases like ours. They're going to paint you as a gold digger and me as a fool. And your grandmother loses her house anyway. Simone stood, fury overriding fear. Don't you dare give up on me now. Not after everything. I'm not giving up. I'm trying to prepare you for the likelihood that this doesn't work. Julian's voice rose. Do you understand what happens if we lose? It's not just the house. It's my company's reputation. My family's name. Your bakery gets associated with fraud. This destroys both of us. Then why did you agree to it in the first place? Because I was desperate and lonely, and you looked at me like I was a person instead of a tragedy. The words exploded out of him. Because for 5 seconds in your bakery, I felt something other than numb, and I would have agreed to anything to keep feeling that way. The silence after his outburst was deafening. Simone felt tears burning behind her eyes. So this was just about you feeling better? I was just, what? Therapy? No. God, no. Julian moved toward her, then stopped. You are so much more than that. But I'm terrified, Simone. Terrified that I dragged you into something that's going to blow up both our lives. Terrified that I'm going to fail you the way I failed Catherine. You didn't fail Catherine. She had an aneurysm. I wasn't there. His voice broke. She died alone in a hospital hallway, and I was in a meeting about a property acquisition, and I didn't even know until 2 hours later. So forgive me if I'm a little gun-shy about making promises I might not be able to keep. Simone's anger drained away, replaced by devastating clarity. This wasn't about the hearing. This was about grief that hadn't healed, guilt that hadn't been resolved, a man who'd convinced himself he didn't deserve a second chance. Julian, look at me. He did, and she saw it all, fear and love and self-loathing tangled together. You can't save everyone, she said softly. You couldn't save Catherine. You might not be able to save my grandmother's house. But you're here, right now, trying. That matters. Does it? If we lose tomorrow, does my trying matter at all? Yes. Because I know the truth even if a judge doesn't. Simone crossed to him, taking his face in her hands the way her grandmother had. I know you stayed up until midnight researching legal precedents. I know you've spent thousands on attorneys you'll never bill me for. I know you learned my family's history because you actually care, not because it helps the case. Simone. I know you're falling for me as hard as I'm falling for you, and it scares you because the last woman you loved died, and some broken part of you thinks that's your fault. Her thumbs brushed across his cheekbones. But it's not. And losing tomorrow, if we lose, won't be your fault either. Julian's hands came up to cover hers, his eyes wet. I can't lose you too. You won't. No matter what happens in that courtroom, you're not losing me. She pressed her forehead to his. But I need you to fight tomorrow. Not because you owe me. Not because you're trying to fix what happened with Catherine. But because this is our life, and it's worth fighting for. Our life, he repeated. 5 weeks, and it's already our life. Yeah. Crazy, right? His laugh was watery. Absolutely insane. They stood there in the pre-dawn darkness, holding each other like lifelines. I'm sorry, Julian whispered. For spiraling. For suggesting we give up. You're allowed to be scared. So am I. Simone pulled back enough to meet his eyes. But we go into that courtroom together. And whatever happens, we deal with it together. That's what this partnership means. Partnership. He smiled despite the tears on his face. Is that what we're calling a marriage? Would you prefer legally binding romantic experiment? How about the best mistake I ever made? Simone kissed him, salt and coffee and desperate hope. That works too. When they finally pulled apart, the sky outside was starting to lighten. 6 hours until the hearing. 6 hours until everything either held together or fell apart. Julian's phone buzzed. Then again. And again. He checked it, and his expression shifted from exhausted to stunned. What? Simone asked. Rebecca. She's been up all night too. He turned the phone to show her. She found something. A precedent case from 2019, couple married to combine health insurance benefits, relationship developed after. Marriage upheld as legitimate because good faith effort to build genuine union was evident. Can we use it? She's already sent it to my attorney. Julian scrolled through more messages. And Caroline found 3 character witnesses willing to testify we've seemed genuinely connected during family events. And my father. He stopped, his voice catching. My father wrote a letter to the judge about grief and second chances. Simone's throat went tight. They're fighting for us. Even after we lied to them. Julian looked at her with wonder. Your family too. Patricia sent an email an hour ago with testimony about seeing real affection between us. So we're not alone in this. No. We're really not. Outside, the sun was rising over Charleston, painting the sky in shades of hope. Simone took Julian's hand. 6 hours. You ready? He squeezed her fingers. Only if you are. Then let's go prove that the best things in life are worth the risk. When everything's on the line, what would you risk for love that started unconventionally? Tell me your thoughts. The courtroom felt smaller than Simone expected. Judge Patricia Morrison, no relation, though her mother had joked weakly about it that morning, sat behind the bench with reading glasses perched on her nose and an expression that gave nothing away. She was black, mid-60s, with the kind of face that had seen every con and hustle Charleston had to offer. Simone sat beside Julian at the plaintiff's table, their attorney Marcus Chen. Damn, she'd have to remember that name was off-limits for future stories, presenting their case with clinical precision. The reverse mortgage company's lawyer was exactly what she'd expected. Mid-40s, expensive suit, smile like a shark. Mrs. Hayes, he began, and Simone still wasn't used to that name. You met my client, excuse me, your husband, on November 7th of this year. Is that correct? Yes. And you were married by November 15th. 8 days later. Yes. In those 8 days, how many times did you see each other in person? Simone's attorney started to object, but she waved him off. 4 times. Coffee twice, dinner once, and the day we got the marriage license. 4 times. The lawyer's smile widened. And in those 4 encounters, you fell in love deeply enough to commit to legal marriage? No, Simone said clearly. In those 4 encounters, I met someone I wanted to know better. The love came after. After the marriage was legally binding and your grandmother's eviction was postponed. After we started living together and building a life. The timeline isn't traditional, but the feelings are real. The lawyer turned to Julian. Mr. Hayes, your wife Catherine died in the spring of 2022. How long did you date before marriage? Julian's jaw tightened. 3 years. 3 years versus 8 days. Quite a difference in your approach to commitment. Catherine and I were kids when we met. We had time to build slowly. Julian's voice stayed level. I'm not a kid anymore. And I've learned that life is short and unpredictable. When you find something good, you don't waste it. Or when you find a mutually beneficial arrangement, you expedite it. The judge intervened. Counsel, get to your point. My point, Your Honor, is that this marriage is a transparent attempt to circumvent legitimate debt collection. These 2 people barely know each other, entered into a legal contract for financial gain, and are now claiming emotional attachment to avoid consequences. Simone felt Julian's hand find hers under the table. Their attorney stood. "Your Honor, we'd like to call a witness. Ellen Hayes." Simone's head whipped around. Julian's mother was here? She'd barely spoken to them since Sunday's confession. Ellen took the stand in a navy dress and pearls, looking every inch the Charleston matriarch. She was sworn in, settled into the chair with perfect posture. "Mrs. Hayes, you're the defendant's mother, correct?" "I am." "And you were upset when you learned the circumstances of your son's marriage?" "I was hurt," Ellen corrected. "There's a difference. I was hurt that Julian felt he couldn't come to me with his struggles. That he felt so pressured by our concern that he sought an unconventional solution." "So you agree the marriage is unconventional?" "I agree it started unconventionally. But I've watched my son these past 5 weeks." Ellen's voice strengthened. "I've seen him smile for the first time since Catherine died. Real smiles, not the polite ones he used to placate us. I've heard him laugh. I've watched him show up for Sunday dinners and talk about his week instead of just existing through conversations." She turned to look directly at Simone. "I've seen him look at that young woman the way he used to look at Catherine, like she's the most interesting person in any room. Like her happiness matters more than his own." Simone's eyes burned. "Mrs. Hayes," the opposing counsel interjected, "your son's emotional state doesn't change the fact. The fact is that my son is a good man who made an unconventional choice and found something real in the process." Ellen cut him off. "And if you think a mother can't tell the difference between her child faking happiness and actually experiencing it, you don't know mothers very well." The judge's expression shifted, not quite a smile, but close. They called Patricia next, who testified about watching Simone come alive again after years of focusing solely on her bakery. Then Mama Dorothy, who described Julian learning her late husband's favorite songs to play on the piano she'd been unable to bear touching. "He didn't do it for show," Dorothy said firmly. "He did it because he understood what it meant. That's not the behavior of a man running a con. That's the behavior of a man joining a family." When the testimony ended, the judge removed her glasses. "I've heard enough. I'll have a decision by end of day." She looked at Simone and Julian. "You two should go get some air. You look like you're about to pass out." Outside the courthouse, Simone finally let herself breathe. "Your mother," she said. "She defended us. My whole family did." Julian pulled out his phone, showing her messages. Caroline had submitted a written statement. Rebecca had provided the legal precedents. His father's letter had apparently made the judge pause for a full minute. "End of day," Simone whispered. "That's 4 more hours of not knowing." Julian took both her hands. "Simone, I need to say something. Before we get the ruling, before anything else happens." "Okay." "This started as a solution to our problems. And maybe if the judge rules against us, maybe if this all falls apart," he stopped, started again. "I don't want it to end." Simone's heart stuttered. "Julian, let me finish. Please." He pulled her closer. "I know we have legal agreements about divorce timelines and clean breaks. I know we planned for this to be temporary. But I don't want temporary anymore. I want you. Messy and complicated and real. We could lose everything today. I don't care. Well, I care about your grandmother's house. I'll spend the rest of my life fighting that battle if I have to. But Simone, even if we lose, even if the worst happens, I want to be losing it with you." His voice dropped. "I love you. Completely. For real. No performance, no arrangement. Just." She kissed him, right there on the courthouse steps in full view of lawyers and strangers and probably someone's cell phone camera. "I love you too," she said against his mouth. "Which is either the best thing or the worst thing, depending on how this goes." "Best thing," Julian said firmly. "Definitely best thing." His phone rang. Their attorney. Julian answered on speaker. Chen. The judge is back. She has a ruling. Get back here now. They looked at each other, terror and hope in equal measure. Whatever happens, Simone started. Together, Julian finished. They walked back into the courthouse hand in hand, ready to hear their fate. The courtroom was silent as Judge Morrison returned to the bench. I've reviewed the evidence, the testimonies, and the relevant case law. She looked at them over her glasses. This is highly irregular. The timeline alone raises significant questions about intent. Simone felt Julian's hand tighten around hers. However, the judge continued, marriage is a legal contract that can begin for any number of reasons: financial, social, practical. What matters is whether the parties are engaging in good faith to build a genuine union. And based on testimony from multiple credible witnesses, including family members initially skeptical of this arrangement, I find evidence of good faith effort. Simone couldn't breathe. The homestead protection is granted. The eviction is stayed pending full appeals process, which I'm ordering expedited given the predatory nature of the original mortgage terms. Judge Morrison's expression softened slightly. Mr. and Mrs. Hayes, I suggest you use this time to continue building what you've started. And perhaps next time, lead with honesty instead of strategy. Yes, Your Honor, they said in unison. You're dismissed. Outside, Simone collapsed against Julian, shaking. We won, she whispered. We won, he repeated, sounding stunned. Then they were laughing and crying and kissing, right there in the November sunshine. They'd won. Have you ever had a moment where everything hung in the balance? What happened? Share your story. The wedding was everything and nothing like Simone had imagined. Mama Dorothy's Victorian was transformed, white flowers everywhere, chairs arranged in the parlor facing the fireplace, soft music playing. Small and intimate, just like they'd wanted. Just like they'd planned before everything got complicated. Except now it wasn't complicated anymore. It was simple. Simone stood in her childhood bedroom upstairs, wearing Rebecca's gift dress, while her mother fastened the delicate buttons along her spine. You're really doing this, Patricia said softly. We already did it. Legally. 3 weeks ago. Simone met her mother's eyes in the mirror. This is just making it real for everyone else. Baby, is it real for you? Simone thought about the past week. About Julian moving his things from the guest room into hers, slowly, carefully, asking permission for every drawer. About waking up wrapped around him, his heartbeat steady under her ear. About the judge's ruling that had saved the house and somehow freed them both to stop performing and start living. Yeah, Mama. It's real. Patricia's eyes filled. Your daddy would have liked him. Would have given him hell first, but he would have liked him. You think? Julian fixed Mama Dorothy's porch railing without being asked. Your daddy always said you can tell a man's character by what he does when nobody's watching. Patricia smoothed Simone's hair. And that man watches you like you hung the moon. Downstairs, Julian was probably getting similar treatment from his father. He was. Robert Hayes stood in the library, adjusting his son's tie with hands that still trembled slightly from the stroke. You sure about this? Robert asked. Not the marriage, that ship sailed. But doing it again, publicly. Inviting scrutiny. I'm sure. Julian's voice was steady. The first time was legal necessity. This time is choice. And you're choosing her. I'm choosing us. There's a difference. Julian met his father's eyes. I know you're worried this is too fast, too soon after Catherine. I'm worried you're going to compare them, Robert interrupted. Your mother and I, we loved Catherine like our own daughter. But son, Simone isn't her. Shouldn't be her. I know that. Do you? Because grief can make us try to recreate what we lost instead of appreciating what we found. Robert's hand settled on Julian's shoulder. Catherine was your wife for 8 years. You built a whole life together. Simone deserves her own life with you, not a shadow of someone else's. Julian swallowed hard. I loved Catherine. I'll always love her. Good. That's healthy. But make room for loving Simone differently. Her own way. Without comparisons or guilt. Robert's voice gentled. You get to have this, Julian. You get to be happy again. Catherine would have wanted that. How do you know? Because when your mother had that cancer scare 5 years back, Catherine pulled me aside. Said if anything ever happened to her, I better make sure you didn't turn into a hermit. Robert smiled slightly. She was bossy like that. Julian laughed, tears in his eyes. Yeah, she was. So go marry that woman downstairs. Really marry her, this time. And let yourself be happy without permission. They embraced, two men who'd almost lost each other learning to hold on tighter. The ceremony was simple. Mama Dorothy's pastor, a woman in her 70s who'd known 4 generations of Washington women, stood before the fireplace. The families filled the chairs, Patricia beside Dorothy, Ellen beside Robert, Rebecca and Caroline flanking both sides. Maya and a few close friends from the bakery. Julian's business partner and his wife. Small. Intimate. Real. Simone walked down the makeshift aisle to a piano recording of her grandfather's favorite hymn, and Julian's face when he saw her made every complicated moment worth it. They'd written their own vows. Simone, Julian began, his voice only slightly shaking. 5 weeks ago, you offered me a deal. A solution to both our problems wrapped in legal documents and practical boundaries. I thought I was agreeing to a temporary arrangement. He took her hands. I didn't realize I was agreeing to fall completely in love with you. Simone's eyes were already wet. You taught me that life doesn't wait for you to be ready. That sometimes the best things come from the worst circumstances. That grief and joy can exist in the same heart without one diminishing the other. He squeezed her fingers. I promise to choose you every day. To build our life, not a replica of my past. To love you exactly as you are, ambitious and fierce and terrible at accepting help. She laughed through tears. I promise to show up. To be honest even when it's hard. To fix porch railings and learn family songs and remember that your great-grandmother's legacy is now mine to protect too. His voice dropped. I promise to give you the real marriage you deserve, not the convenient one we started with. Simone took a shaky breath. Julian, I thought I was getting a husband in name only. Someone to sign documents and live in separate rooms and disappear when the crisis passed. She smiled. I got so much more than that. Julian's thumb brushed across her knuckles. You showed me that strength isn't just about independence. That asking for help doesn't make you weak. That sometimes the universe puts exactly the right person in your path at exactly the right moment. Her voice strengthened. I promise to be patient with your grief. To make space for Catherine's memory while building our own. To understand that healing isn't linear and love isn't replacement. I promise to laugh with you at 3 a.m. when we're both spiraling. To let you fix things because it makes you happy, not because I need saving. To build a life that honors where we've both been while celebrating where we're going. She met his eyes fully. I promise to love you, really love you, messy and complicated and absolutely real. The pastor smiled. By the power vested in me, and by the choice you've both made twice now, I pronounce you husband and wife. Again. For real this time. Julian kissed her like he meant it, because he did. The reception was Dorothy's dining room filled with food and laughter. Rebecca's toast made everyone cry. Caroline's made everyone laugh. Patricia presented them with a quilt pieced from family fabrics, including a square from Catherine's favorite dress that Ellen had quietly contributed. Both your stories matter, Patricia said simply. Past and present. As the evening wound down, Simone found Julian on the porch, staring at the house he'd helped save. Hey, husband, she said softly. He turned, pulling her close. Hey, wife. How's it feel? Different than 3 weeks ago. Good different. The best different. She leaned into him. We really did this. Twice, he reminded her. Once for legal reasons, once for real. Which one counts? Julian kissed her forehead. Both. All of it. Every messy, complicated, beautiful moment. Inside, their families were cleaning up together, Hayes and Washington, blended by circumstance and choice. So what now? Simone asked. We've saved the house, won the case, had the wedding. What's the next chapter? Julian's smile was soft. Now we just live. Build the bakery, run the company, have Sunday dinners. Figure out marriage one day at a time. Sounds boring compared to legal battles and courthouse drama. Sounds perfect. He turned her to face him. I love you, Simone Washington Hayes. She'd hyphenated her name that morning. Both families, both legacies, woven together. I love you too, Julian Hayes Washington. He raised an eyebrow. You want me to hyphenate? Fair's fair. Deal, he said, and kissed her under the porch light of the house for generations of women had loved. Their house now. Their story. Their real beginning. What moment made you realize something in your life shifted from temporary to permanent? I'd love to hear. Christmas morning arrived with snow, rare for Charleston, but the universe apparently had a flair for drama. Simone woke wrapped in Julian's arms, sunlight filtering through curtains in the master bedroom they'd finally, fully claimed as theirs. 6 weeks since that impossible conversation in her bakery. 6 weeks that had changed everything. Merry Christmas, wife, Julian murmured against her hair. Merry Christmas, husband. She turned to face him. We made it. We did. His smile was lazy, content. Though I'm pretty sure the hard part's just beginning. Marriage, you mean? Marriage, the appeals process, combining our lives, explaining to people why my business cards now say Hayes Washington. He kissed her nose. All of it. Downstairs, Mama Dorothy was already cooking. Simone could smell coffee and cinnamon rolls. Their families were coming at noon for Christmas dinner. Both families, together, becoming something new. But first, they had something to do. Julian drove them to Magnolia Cemetery as the snow started to stick. Catherine's grave was in the Hayes family plot, a simple headstone with dates that had ended far too soon. Simone had asked to come. Julian had looked surprised, then grateful. They stood together in the quiet, snow gathering on the marble. Hi, Catherine, Julian said softly. I brought someone I want you to meet. His hand found Simone's. This is Simone. My wife. I think you'd like her. She's stubborn and brilliant, and she makes these pecan tosses that are almost as good as yours were. Simone smiled despite the tears in her eyes. I'm doing okay, Julian continued. Better than okay, actually. And I know that's what you wanted. You told me enough times. Don't you dare become one of those sad widowers who stops living. His voice caught. So I'm living. Really living. And it doesn't mean I loved you less. It just means I'm learning to love differently. Simone squeezed his hand, giving him space to say goodbye and hello in the same breath. Thank you, Julian whispered. For 8 amazing years. For teaching me what partnership looks like. For making me promise to keep going even when it got hard. He paused. I'm keeping that promise now. I hope that's okay. The snow fell softly, blessing and benediction. After a long moment, Simone spoke. I promise to take care of him, Catherine. Not because he needs taking care of, he's pretty capable. But because he deserves someone who sees him. All of him. The grief and the joy and everything in between. Julian's arm came around her waist. And I promise to honor what you built together. To never try to replace you or erase you. You're part of his story, which makes you part of ours. Simone's voice strengthened. Thank you for loving him well. For teaching him how to be a partner. I'm grateful for that gift. They stood together in the snow, honoring the past while claiming the future. On the drive back, Julian was quiet. Then, that meant everything to me. You didn't have to do that. Yes, I did. She was important to you. She's always going to be important. Simone touched his face. I'm not threatened by her memory, Julian. I'm grateful for it. She shaped the man I fell in love with. He pulled over, right there on the snowy road, and kissed her until they were both breathless. How did I get this lucky twice? He whispered. Maybe the universe figured you deserved it. Christmas dinner was chaos in the best way. Mama Dorothy's table extended with every leaf, barely containing both families and enough food to feed Charleston. Patricia and Ellen had discovered a shared love of terrible reality TV. Robert and Dorothy were deep in conversation about property restoration. Caroline was teaching Maya how to make her famous bourbon balls while Rebecca reviewed legal briefs for the appeals case. Julian stood at the kitchen doorway, watching his wife laugh with his sisters while folding napkins, and felt something settle in his chest. Peace. Belonging. Home. You look happy, son, Robert said, appearing beside him. I am. Is that okay? It's more than okay. It's exactly right. Robert clinked his glass against Julian's. To new beginnings and blended families. To taking chances on impossible things. After dinner, Julian pulled Simone aside, away from the laughter and chaos. I have something for you. A real gift this time, not a legal strategy. He handed her an envelope. Inside was a deed to the building next to Sweet Traditions. Julian, this is yours. For expansion. You mentioned wanting to add a cafe space, maybe teaching kitchens. He was talking fast, nervous. The building was going on the market next month. I bought it yesterday. It's in your name only, no strings, no Hayes Properties involvement. Just you, building your dream bigger. Simone stared at the deed, overwhelmed. This is too much. It's not nearly enough. You saved me, Simone. You gave me a reason to stop existing and start living. Let me invest in your future the way you invested in mine. We invested in each other, she corrected. That's what marriage means. Then consider it an investment in us. In the life we're building. Julian pulled out another envelope. And this is for your grandmother. Full legal fees covered for going after the reverse mortgage company. Rebecca's firm is taking the case pro bono, but there are court costs, expert witnesses. It's handled. Simone's vision blurred. You're going to make me cry on Christmas. Good tears, I hope. Instead of answering, she kissed him, soft and certain and full of promise. I have something for you too, she said, pulling him toward the library. On the restored piano, the one Julian had learned to play Dorothy's favorite songs on, sat a photograph in a silver frame. Julian and Catherine on their wedding day, young and glowing. Beside it, a new frame with Julian and Simone from last week's ceremony. I don't want her hidden away, Simone explained. She's part of your story. Part of our story now. And someday when we have kids, if we have kids, I want them to know about the brave, brilliant woman who loved their father first. Julian pulled her close, his face buried in her hair, shoulders shaking. I love you so much it terrifies me, he said roughly. Good. Terror means you're alive and feeling things. She pulled back to meet his eyes. We're going to have a beautiful, messy, complicated life, Julian Hayes, Washington. And I can't wait for every minute of it. Even the boring parts, the ordinary days, especially those. Simone smiled. I've had enough drama for a lifetime. Now I just want to wake up next to you, bake bread, fix creaky stairs, and build something that lasts. Sounds perfect. Through the doorway, they could hear their families, laughter and arguments and the comfortable noise of people who belonged together. Should we go back? Simone asked. In a minute. Julian framed her face with his hands. I just want to remember this. Christmas Day, snow in Charleston, our families together, you in my arms. This is what I was afraid I'd never have again. And now I'm afraid of how much I want it. Want you. Want all of it. His thumb brushed her cheekbone. You terrify me in the best way, Simone Washington Hayes. Back at you, husband. They returned to the dining room hand in hand. Mama Dorothy was pulling out photo albums, much to Caroline's delight and Julian's horror. Patricia had found Simone's baby pictures. Ellen was already planning Easter dinner at the Hayes estate. Rebecca caught Simone's eye and mouthed, "You good?" Simone nodded, squeezing Julian's hand. Better than good. She was home. Later, as the families finally dispersed and the house grew quiet, Simone and Julian stood on the porch watching snow fall on the Victorian that had started everything. 6 weeks ago, I was sitting in my car outside your bakery, trying to work up the courage to go inside, Julian said. I'd been there 4 times and still hadn't talked to you beyond ordering coffee. What changed? I heard you on the phone. Heard the desperation in your voice. And something in me just broke open. He pulled her closer. Or maybe broke open is wrong. Maybe it finally started healing. And now I'm standing on the porch of our house, married to the woman I love, with both our families inside arguing about who gets to host Thanksgiving. Now I'm living again instead of just surviving. Julian turned her to face him. Now I'm grateful for every impossible coincidence that brought us here. Simone kissed him, slow and sweet, tasting snow and promise. Here's to impossible things, she whispered. To fake marriages that become real. To strangers who become family. To you, Julian said, his forehead against hers. Always to you. Inside, the house glowed warm and welcoming. 4 generations of love and 1 new chapter just beginning. Outside, the snow fell softly on Charleston, blessing the start of their forever. Epilogue. 1 year later. Sweet Traditions Cafe and Teaching Kitchen opened on a crisp November morning, exactly 1 year after Simone and Julian's first conversation. The expansion was everything she'd dreamed: commercial teaching space, a cafe serving her great-grandmother's recipes, walls covered with Washington family photos alongside Hayes restoration blueprints. 2 legacies, woven together. Julian cut the ribbon while Mama Dorothy and both their mothers cried happy tears. That evening, sitting on their porch, because yes, it was still their porch, they'd never left the Victorian, Simone handed Julian an envelope. Inside was a photo, a tiny ultrasound image. We're. He couldn't finish the sentence. We're pregnant. 8 weeks. Simone watched emotions cascade across his face. I know we said we'd wait, but apparently the universe had other plans. Julian kissed her, laughing and crying at once. The universe has excellent timing. We should tell the families. Tomorrow. Tonight, let's just sit with it. The 2 of us. So they did, wrapped in blankets against the November chill, dreaming about the future they were building one impossible day at a time. Inside, the house that had brought them together stood strong, foundation restored, legacy preserved, love multiplying in ways neither of them could have planned. The best things, they'd learned, rarely went according to plan. They just went according to the heart. The end. What impossible thing are you grateful happened in your life? Share your story of unexpected blessings below. And if this story touched your heart, let me know what resonated most. Your comments mean everything.
Thank you so much for watching till the end. It truly means a lot to me. If this video touched your heart or resonated with you in any way, please show your support by hitting that like button and subscribing to Emotional Voyage. Your support helps us reach more souls on this journey. Until next time, take care of your heart.